such email that I referred to. It's dated the 25th of September 2006. So, Chair, that's 3 days after the Sowetan article. So between the Sowetan article and the department doing an assessment to say there's actually nothing wrong, in that 3-day period, there's an email from Dr. Savoy of Intaka to Dr. Nyambezi, the head of Department of Health. And it commences, "Dear Amiga, as agreed
I'm sorry, just stop there. In the course of your investigation, did you get to understand the amigos and amiga? I wonder whether amiga is the female version of the word. Amigos maybe plural for male.
So
my Latin, I'm influenced by my Latin background.
So, Chair, my understanding
But
is
this
it
must
was,
be Greek or something.
it was the female version. Amigo is male and amiga is female.
Yes.
Because depending on the emails that were sent, if it was amigo, it was addressed to a male. If it was amiga, it was addressed to a female.
And what does it mean? Did you get to understand that?
Chair, my understanding is it was just a friendly way of, yeah, it's effectively dear friend.
Yes. Okay. I think when we were looking at an email or letter that was addressed to certain people in regard to, or certain people in the Department of Traditional Affairs and Local Government yesterday, there was somewhere where it was saying, "Hello, amigos." And I understood you to say this is not the way you would expect a potential supplier to a government department to be addressing the people that they deal with. And I thought that that might be because of your understanding of the word. Did I understand you correctly?
Correct. Chair, it's partly because of the word, but mainly because of the content of the emails.
Yes, yes.
They are on a very personal.
Yes, yeah.
There's no.
It's more personal than business, yeah.
Yeah, correct. There's no formal introduction, etc.
It's like just writing to a friend.
Correct, Chair.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
So, Chair, that email, it then says, as agreed upon, please note as follows. 1, water purification system, herewith the name of the companies. And there's one company called Westpro, and there's a contact details of the people and the email address. And then Imvusa Stainless, and again, contact details of the people and the addresses. And then at the bottom of the page, and ourselves, Intaka Investments, for the patented equipment Wataka. Do not hesitate to contact me. And then on the following page, please bear in mind that we have Wataka's model HWT ready for delivery just in time. Chair, those two entities, Westpro and Imvusa Stainless, are entities that had a business relationship with Intaka. Westpro is a company that supplies pumps that are used in the manufacture of the Wataka, and Imvusa Stainless was a company that did the manufacturing of the plant on behalf of Intaka. So they were the company that did stainless steel vats, etc., for the wine industry in the Western Cape, but they made these plants on instruction of Intaka as well. Those are the two entities that subsequently quoted and provided quotes to Dr. Nyambezi on behalf of, that were used as comparative quotes to the Intaka quote. So you can see from this email, Dr. Savoy is telling her who to ask. Her PA subsequently sent the emails requesting them to ask, and they then submitted quotes that had actually been prepared by Intaka and emailed to them by Intaka. So Dr. Nyambezi and Dr. Savoy,
they collaborated
to inflate the prices effectively, Chair.
Okay.
And Chair, these are all things.
Sorry, Mr. White, not only to inflate the prices, Because was there a requirement that 3 quotes be obtained?
Well, Chair, it should have gone to tender because of the amount.
Yes.
This is a 10 million rand
Yes.
project. You can't get quotes. It needs to go to
Yes.
tender.
Yes.
But Chair, effectively, Dr. Nyambezi created the need because there wasn't, if one looks at the department's own records, there wasn't a need for a water purification plant. So, and then in conjunction with Dr. Savoy, identified who to ask to quote. Chair, of interest is that Mvusa Stainless and Westpro are not on the supplier database in KwaZulu-Natal. So how would supply chain management even know about them? They're not even suppliers to the department. So Chair, when one looks at all the details, it becomes clear that this was just a fabrication of documents to circumvent the procurement process.
Were there no suppliers in KZN that could provide this kind of product, as far as you may have established during your investigation?
So Chair, I can't recall the name of it, but we did look at the time. So at the time we looked in the yellow pages, telephone book, and there were some adverts for people that said, and we phoned some of them, and they said they could provide something similar. If they'd been asked, they would have considered it. So not exactly the same, but something that would do the same job.
Yes, and obviously that could save a lot in terms of at least the delivery that was said to be about, what, 5 million in regard to yesterday's plant for traditional affairs, which I don't know what the delivery would be here.
So Chair, the point relating to, if one compares to the traditional affairs supply, those were being supplied at the same time, in the same 6 months of 2006, those were being charged at 2.2 million rand each. These are now being charged at 4.9 million rand each. Maybe slightly different size, but it doesn't.
But the price is about double.
It's more than double.
More than double.
And Chair, there's an affidavit in the docket from Grotto and Mvusa, the 2 entities that manufactured on behalf of Intaka, and they said the delivered price to KZN would be approximately 750,000 rand each cost. So anything above that would be a profit to Intaka. They're now charging a price of almost 5 million rand each. So it's a profit of more than 4 million rand per item supplied.
Did you get to know whether the Dr. Nyambezi and the people in the Department of Health knew about the price and the price of the ones that were delivered to the Department of Traditional Health? They must have known, because they were dealing with the same supplier, and the supplier were provided to the same provincial government. It was just different departments.
So Chair, I don't know that I don't see anything that specifically says they knew.
Yes.
But as you say,
it would be surprising if they didn't know.
Correct, Chair.
Because it's unlikely that in seeking to sell this to them, it's unlikely that Intaga didn't say we are also providing the same to your colleagues in the Department of Traditional Affairs. And if they said that, then the Department of Health should have checked what has happened, what were you charged, what are we being charged, and all of that.
Correct, Chair, but if one just looks at what, my view would be Dr. Nyambezi didn't care, because she's personally manipulating the procurement process and circumventing it and assisting. So she didn't care what the price was, because she was already instrumental in asking for quotations from the supplier that she wants to win the work. So she didn't care about the price.
Yes. Yeah.
And what position did Mr. Shabalala hold in the department?
So, Chair, he had no position in the Department of Health, but he was the
I'm sorry, you said Mr. Shabalala.
Yes.
so he was the head of the Provincial Treasury, Chair, but we'll show when it comes to the oxen talkers how he had some involvement in the procurement process there.
But we'll deal with that in due course. Thank you. Now, if you don't mind, if we can go back to this memorandum on page 708, the 6th of October 2006 memorandum, which requests an exemption from supply chain management procedures, essentially a exemption to go out to tender. Now, what was the basis of that exemption? What was used?
The
as the
urgency,
reason?
Chair.
Urgency.
I'm
And-
sorry, are we back at 708?
Yes.
708, okay.
And on page 709 at the top, paragraph 9.047, who was the memorandum signed by? And who were those, what positions did those people hold?
So, Chair, Mr. Nshangasi was the head of the Supply Chain Management and Health. So he was the preparer of the document. It was then recommended by Mr. Buthelezi, the Chief Financial Officer in the Department of Health, and it was ultimately approved by Dr. Nyambezi, the head of Department of Health.
And attached to this memorandum were 3 quotations, which you then deal with on page 709 from paragraphs 9.049. If you can just deal with that. We've basically touched on it.
So, Chair, that's just the proof that we obtained showing from the emails and the computers that were imaged how the quotations got to the Department of Health. And the fact that the person that was doing this on the instruction of Dr. Nyambezi was her personal assistant, and the emails were being sent from and being received by her personal assistant on the instruction of Dr. Nyambezi. So, Chair, that just shows that the request for quotations and the receipt, therefore, didn't originate with supply chain management, but it was all done out of the office of the head of department. And, Chair, in support of that, there's emails. The quotations that are attached to the emails are the same ones that ended up being attached to the memorandum that was then submitted for approval. So that's just the detail to support that conclusion, Chair.
Now, 3 days after this memorandum, there is a letter from the KwaZulu Health Department dated the 9th of October 2006, referred to by you in your report in page 712, and paragraph 9058.
So, Chair, that's just the way I've structured this report. I've just, in a chronological order, put all the documentation. So again, this is just 3 days later. The decision is made, and it is now sent to Intaka for the attention of Dr. Gaston Savoy. And in 9.059, the content of the letter says, I have pleasure in advising you that the department has awarded the above-mentioned quotation to your organization at a total cost of 9,960,000 rand, including VAT.
Yes.
Now, after the award of the contract, I'm referring you to page 715, paragraph 9.068. What then happens on the 19th of October 2006, a few weeks later?
So, Chair, there's a further report prepared by the Environmental Health Department within the Department of Health relating to the quality of water at the various hospitals. So they'd obviously taken the allegations seriously, and they'd done further testing. This is again prepared by Mr. Kanyile and addressed to Dr. Nyambezi.
And where is that?
On page 715, Chair, at paragraph 9.068.
Yes, okay.
So that's the memorandum of 19 October 2006. And Chair, that lists all the health institutions within KwaZulu-Natal, hospitals and clinics, and summarizes the results of the test, but where they were negative, but there's no mention of Rietvlei Hospital or Appelsbosch Hospital, because their testing there was no issue.
Because they had tested it and they found that there was no problem.
There was no problem.
Yes.
So, Chair,
That is sent to the head of department again
correct,
as well. Yeah.
Correct, Chair. So there's now 2 reports to the head of department that says that those 2 specific hospitals, there is no issue.
And was it in respect of those 2 hospitals that the water purification plants were brought?
Correct, Chair.
So the one hospital is Appelsbosch, the other one is
Rietvlei, Chair.
Rietvlei. Yeah, and the finding of Mr. Kanyile's team is the same in regard to both.
Correct, Chair.
Yes, okay. Well, maybe you will address this at a later stage, but I would like to know now, did you come across any document where anybody within the Department of Health, including Dr. Nyembezi, sought to justify their decision or their decision to buy these, to place these orders in regard to the 2 hospitals, despite the fact that there was a report by health professionals within the department which said there was no problem.
No, Chair, there was no.
Don't deal with it anywhere.
Chair, none of the documents that I saw, and we looked at everything we could find relating to this, explained why they would still go forward with the procurement, even although there are these reports saying there's no issue.
Yes, but I know that you said yesterday in regard to or was it the day before yesterday, in regard to one of the projects that you investigated, I think in regard to Mr. Pandey and Colonel Madu, that you didn't speak to people who were or who seemed to be implicated because the police were in charge of that investigation, and your understanding was that there was going to be a stage later on when the police could approach the implicated persons for warning statements. In regard to this one, did you never speak to anyone who was implicated, such as Dr. Nyembezi?
So, Chair, this matter proceeded right up to the stage where it had trial dates in the High Court. So all these people had been arrested and warning statements obtained. Most of the warning statements they declined to give a version.
Put up a version.
Correct, Chair.
Yes. And since then you are not aware of any version that somebody like Dr. Nyembezi may have put up for one reason or another?
I don't know of any version that she did put up, Chair.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. Now, you've said in your report that after the authorization had been granted in October of 2006, a number of concerns were raised. What were those concerns? And what was before? Okay, let's first deal with what were those concerns.
So, Chair, it was a similar situation to what happened with local government and traditional affairs. The entities where these water purification plants were to be installed had not been properly consulted in the process. So when they suddenly were told, here's an order, this is to be installed at your hospital, there then became a lot of toing and froing between the technical people within the department as well as the Department of Public Works. Because effectively what was proposed was that the municipal supply of water to the hospital be diverted through this water purification plant and then continue to the hospital. And officials from Public Works started to get involved and said, well, we're responsible for the pipes, but as soon as you now divert it to something else, we're not sure whether that meets our standards. And as a result, there was a lot of pushback from various individuals, and so it just led to months of delay. Chair, what was interesting is that I never saw any further reports to say in those months of delay there was a problem with the water. There were no further things saying people are getting sick as a result of the water.
The fundamental point is that there was no need for this in regard to those hospitals.
Based on the documentation and the people
Yes.
that were interviewed, that's
Yes.
my view, Chair, yes.
Yes. And those who said there was a need in the Department of Health were aware of Mr. Kanyele's report, and they didn't put up any criticism of the conclusions reached in that report, as far as you are aware.
Correct, Chair.
So they just went ahead, did something that was contrary to a report that, to your knowledge, they could not attack on any grounds.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah.
And then, if I can refer you to page 724 at paragraph 9.094, which is a letter of the 22nd of January 2007, addressed by Dr. Inyembezi to Savoy.
I'm sorry, you said page 714?
724, sorry, Chair.
724.
And it's paragraph 9.094.
Yes.
So, Chair, that is some 3 months later. And it states, it's about the Appelsbos Hospital. And it says, further to our discussions regarding the delays in the installation of the Wataka water purifier at Appelsbos Hospital, it is my understanding that representatives from Health, Works and Intaka met at Appelsbos on 28 September 2006 and decided on where the plant should be installed. Please proceed with installation as agreed at the meeting. So it's still not installed. And Chair, that, and I'll say it in the following paragraph at 9.095, that on 23 March 2007, Intaka sent a letter to Dr. Nyembezi advising her the installation and commissioning was complete. So, Chair, effectively it took some 5 months to actually install these plants. And from what I could see, there was no further reports of any negative publicity around people getting sick or anything else as a result of the water. And Chair, the interesting fact is that same water is the water that supplies the towns. So it wouldn't just be a hospital issue, it would be a whole community issue if there was something wrong with the water.
Okay, Mr. White, if we can then go to page 778, and there you
To
deal...
what page?
778, Chair.
30.
778,
Oh,
778.
okay. Yes.
So, Chair, that is just where I referred to, and I briefly mentioned it, this is just the detail. This is where we found the evidence in the electronic records of Intaka where they sent the quotes that were to be used to be submitted to the Department of Health by Westpro and Mvusa Stainless. So and the wording is exactly the same, Chair. If we look at the attachment to the email that was sent, it just wasn't on these respective entities' letterheads. So once these entities received it, they placed it on their own letterheads and sent it back to the Department of Health. But the source of the content and the price came from Intaka.
So if we can just have a look at that from 9.218, who was Ashley Spencer?
She was one of the personal assistants at Intaka.
And it's directed to who?
This one was to a Mr. Geddes.
And then it says, please find the attached letter with the amendment concerning the spelling of the name. And then attached thereto is a letter dated the 29th of September 2006, addressed to the Department of Health. Attention, Samantha Cheetle, titled Ray Water Purification Plants. This would indicate that Intaka prepared a letter on a blank letterhead and sent it to Ron Geddes at Westboro. So were they required to put this letter on their letterhead?
Correct, and that's exactly what happened. And Chair, just Samantha Cheetle is the personal assistant to Dr. Nyambezi.
And
Yes.
then in paragraph 2 on page 779,
1 second, Miss. Yes, thank you, Ms. Venzel.
thank you. Then paragraph 2, page 779, Ashley Spencer sends a similar email to Mr. Miller. Is that correct?
Correct, Chair.
And he's told to do exactly the same thing.
Correct, Chair.
Now, if we could go to page 784. Oh, no, sorry, we've dealt with that. I went ahead, Chair, and showed you the email from Savoy to Dr. Nyambezi, in which he tells her exactly which companies to quote. Now, having given that picture with regard to the purchase of the water for purification plants, I'd like to now deal with the purchase of the oxygen generating plants. Sorry.
Would you like
No, if
a
you'd like to
comfort
deal with
break?
something affirmative.
Sorry, Chair, just the one point that Advocate Wenzel didn't cover was the fact that the two individuals that did the cover quotes, they, while initially when they were interviewed, they denied that they'd done anything wrong. They subsequently entered into a plea bargain with the state in terms of Section 105A, and a copy of that plea bargain is at TSW 20, page 1960 in Bundle D.
1960. Well, let's have a look at it. And who were those individuals?
So, Chair, it was a Mr. Miller and a Mr. Ramani.
Songwane.
Ramani.
Oh, okay.
Romani.
And were they the people in charge of the entities who were requested to supply these quotes?
So yes, Chair, they were involved in those two entities, and they subsequently, while initially denying that anything improper had been done,
Yes.
once all the evidence became available,
Yes.
their legal representatives
Yeah.
suggested that they enter into a plea bargain with the state, which they did, and that plea bargain related to both the cases in KwaZulu-Natal, as well as there was another plea bargain on the same day for similar cases in the Northern Cape.
Yes. And in terms of that agreement, plea bargaining agreement, they pleaded guilty to certain charges.
was effectively to fraud, Chair, relating to the provision of the cover quotes.
Yes. So they accepted that they participated, they played a criminal role in the whole thing.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to, before we move to the next topic, I wanted to confirm with you that my understanding is correct, that there seems to be some similarity in what the Department of Health and Dr. Savoy were doing here in regard to these purchases with what Mr. Pandey was doing with regard to SAPS. Mr. Pandey was supplying SAPS with entities that were said to be independent of him, but they were actually not independent of him. Dr. Savoy is supplying names of entities to Dr. Nyembezi and saying you can ask for quotes from them. The difference might be that in regard to Mr. Pandey's scheme, well, I don't know if the provincial commissioner didn't know that those entities that were said to be competing with, is it Gold Coast? I don't know if she knew or she didn't know, but the people who were at the supply chain management, Colonel Madu, may have known or did know that these were all entities linked to Mr. Pandey. And in regard to the Department of Health, Dr. Nyembezi probably knew because she got herself involved to getting names of entities from which to get codes from Dr. Savoy in Taga, who wanted to do business with them. Do you see any similarities, although they are not 100%?
Chair, they're very similar. I think I would go further and remove the word probably knew. I think on the documents, I can come to the conclusion they knew that the entities were linked or in one way were working together. Chair, in 20 years, this is probably the common way, the most common way in which supply chain management procedures are circumvented, where entities collude with each other to have inflated prices. But Chair, it's something that's very difficult to do without the involvement of an official within the department. So you need a person internally, the government officials, and then you need the private sector suppliers. They need to collude together. This process won't work. Well, they won't be able to circumvent the procedures.
They need to have somebody inside.
Correct, Chair.
Yes.
And Chair, why the people inside should always be able to pick this up is if they advertised in the proper procedure, the chances of only linked entities quoting against each other is almost zero.
So the entities or suppliers in the private sector need somebody inside who will ignore the fact that he is aware that they are linked or they have a relationship with one another.
Well, correct, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. White, if we could now look at your report TSW7 in, I think it's the previous bundle, bundle B, at page 539.
D.
B.
B for Beatrice?
B for Beatrice.
Yeah, I think it's much better if
Sorry.
you say something to make sure I know whether it's B or D. So B for Beatrice, or B
Yes.
for Bull,
For Bull, for Beatrice. Bad.
D for Dudu, or D for Doris, D for Derek. It just helps so that
Yes.
I look at the right one. Yeah, okay. It's the same one we had, that we were having.
I think we were in C, and now we're in B.
Well, I thought we were in B.
Were we?
Chair, it's just earlier on in B.
Oh,
It's
sorry.
the same file, but it's
Yes,
earlier on.
sorry.
yeah.
Sorry, I'm confused. Sorry, Chair, I
So
apologize.
what page?
Page 539.
Okay.
Now, this is a report of yours dated the 24th of May, 2010, marked Annexure TSW 7. Could you please tell the Chair, identify this report, and explain to the Chair what was about?
Chair,
And confirm,
I'm the author of the report
yeah.
and stand by the contents thereof.
yeah.
Chair, that now relates to the tender that was advertised by the Department of Health relating to the procurement of the Oxentalk, as the oxygen self-generating units. Chair, this instance is slightly different to the previous ones because in this instance there was a tender. So it was advertised by open tender. But the difference here, Chair, is that
I'm sorry, so this one was for buying what?
Oxentalk, the oxygen
okay.
generating units.
Yeah, there is Wataka and Oxentalk. Okay.
So, Chair, in this instance, there was a tender, it was advertised, and various bidders responded. But, Chair, the issue with this tender is that Dr. Savoy colluded with Dr. Nyambezi in the setting of the specifications that were advertised in the tender. And, Chair, I'll refer to various documents where there were emails backwards and forwards in the lead up to the advertising of the tender, where Dr. Savoy, in track changes on the bid document, changed the specifications, added things or deleted things where his product didn't comply with the Department of Health. And that process was a backwards and forwards process more than once to Dr. Nyambezi's email address, culminating in a bid specification that suited to the best he could in TACA. So while they couldn't take out all the competition, they set the specifications to suit his company to the prejudice of all the other potential bidders.
So to tell that story, if we could please start at page 573. And paragraph 9.061, dealing with, you say, I also located an email from Savoy to Dr. Nyambezi, dated the 27th of November 2006. Could you tell the Chair, please, about that email?
So, Chair, that email, once again, was found in the electronic records of Intaka that was seized by the police. And the content of that email, in the third line, reads as follows. Dear Amiga, checking the document with our technical staff, it was detected that a lot of things were added that are not according to our specifications, neither to ISO 10083 specifications with which we comply. Therefore, I enclosed the draft with the modifications / withdrawals highlighted in red. And then attached to that document, Chair, was the draft bid specifications, where Dr. Savoy or the technical staff working for him at Intaka had deleted some items and had added other items. And
Do you deal with the changes that were made on page 574 from paragraphs 1 to 12?
Chair, I just referred to the different paragraphs in the bid specs that were either added or deleted.
Then,
Are there any particular changes that he made that you think deserve special attention?
Chair, I don't recall the specific details
Yes,
because
okay.
it was 10 years ago.
Yes, okay.
But
I
it
thought
was,
maybe somewhere else in your report you may be dealing with them.
Chair, the point I was just trying to make is that there were a lot, and
Yes.
that he's having input prior to
Yeah.
becoming public.
Yes.
And doing things where his entity doesn't comply with the original draft specs, he's now deleting them. And where there's something extra his entity's got, he's putting it in as a requirement, potentially to the prejudice of any other bidder that doesn't have that little extra piece.
And he was allowed to do that by the head of department.
Well, Chair, that's what the emails reflect.
Yeah.
And ultimately, his changes ended up, most of them, in the final bids that were advertised.
well, let's see, on page 575, paragraph 9.063, the head of department, Ms. Nyembezi, replies to Savoy, also in an email dated the 29th of November 2006. Could you explain to the Chair what she says there?
So, Chair, that's 2 days after the previous email I've referred to. And in the fourth line down, I quote from what she says, where she says, "Success at last, hope you get it." And then attached to that is the bid specification, a Word document with the revised specifications. And Chair, then down the bottom of that page at paragraph 9.064, on the same day, Dr. Savoy replies, "Dear Amiga, I'm sending the replies in green underlined." So he's made further changes to the revised specifications.
Yes, but where are you reading from? It's 575?
9.064,
Okay, no, dear Amiga, yeah, I see. That is addressed to who?
Dr. Nyembezi.
Yes,
So
okay.
these emails are a chain of emails where they're just replying backwards and forwards.
Yes, yes.
And then, perhaps, if you could tell the Chair the conclusion that you come to refer to in paragraph 9.065 on page 576.
So, Chair, relating to these changes in the fourth line of that paragraph, I state, "It is clear, however, that Intaka was advising the department what to include and exclude in the bid specification document for the 52 hospitals tender, and that this was still an official document and not a public one that had gone out to tender, and that Intaka themselves would later provide a bid." Chair, it was a significant tender. It was to supply all the oxygen requirements at 52 hospitals in KZN, so all the hospitals. And Intaka's now had ongoing input into the specifications, which then ultimately become the final specifications.
I mean, did your investigation ever reveal how somebody whose company operated from the Western Cape came to end up having the kind of influence that he seems to have had on senior officials in these departments, where he was just getting whatever he wanted.
Mr. Chair, the introduction appears to have come via Mr. Shabalala, the head of Treasury. And then ultimately there were monies paid to people in either senior positions in the department or the MECs of those departments. So, Chair, the inference would have to be drawn that this kind of relationship was because there was pressure from higher up to do business with these entities, regardless of the cost or the detriment to the department in which these officials worked. Because, Chair, most of these officials that did these incorrect things, it could never have been a mistake. Because just on the documents, and we can see when it comes to getting ultimately contracts signed, there's pushback from officials in the department. They really try and not implement what's actually been awarded in terms of a tender process because they disagree. And it takes months and months for these things for contracts to be signed or things to be installed because people lower down in the hierarchy don't agree with what's happening. But ultimately they get overruled.
Now, you told me that when you were doing this investigation, various people had already been arrested and so on and so on. Did you ever get a chance to speak to those officials, lower-ranking officials, who may have experienced what was happening and were able to get any input from them?
So, Chair, all the people that were involved in the process, in the procurement or the implementation, etc., were all interviewed as part of that process and provided affidavits that were ultimately either referred to in my reports and or ended up in the police docket. So and a lot of them were very critical of the process, but ultimately they were just pressurized into, even if they raised concerns, eventually they were overruled.
So in this case, you were able to interview them, or your team was able to interview them, and affidavits and statements were obtained, which are in the live arch files that have been made available to the Commission.
Correct, Chair.
Okay.
And Chair, those interviews were done, most of them in conjunction with the investigating officers that were allocated to the matter.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, after this, did the contract go out to tender? And you said with the specifications as manipulated by Mr. Savoy.
Correct, Chair. Those specifications were finally approved by the Bid Specification Committee in the Department of Health on the 30th of November 2006. There were people bid for it, and the winning bidder was ultimately adjudicated as being Intaka. But the losing bidders, a number of them then appealed, and their appeals were overruled, were dismissed.
And
So
those
they didn't go to court.
No, Chair, it was
About
part
it.
of the internal, the
Appeals.
departmental appeals process.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
And you deal with that at page 590, paragraph 10.
Is it 590?
Yes.
So, Chair, there I just referred to, the detail follows, but the entities that appealed were Afrox, Insmed, and Myriad Medical. The only interesting aspect is that, Chair, that appeal process is run out of the provincial treasury. Effectively, they oversee the appeals process on procurement. And then once that appeal process had been concluded and effectively a decision had almost been made, we identified that Mr. Shabalala, who I referred to yesterday, he now also sent an SMS to Intaka, which I referred to at page 599. And
Yes.
paragraph 9.93. And Chair, just to maybe explain what the people at Intaka seem to have had again, very helpful if you're doing an investigation. They typed out everything they received by SMS and filed it. And if it were emails, in many instances, they printed them out and filed them, which was quite helpful when doing an investigation.
Yeah.
So this was...
Well, not very much unlike Mr. Pandey's situation.
Correct, Chair. These were very nice investigations to do.
You must have been you are common to both. You are the investigator for both, and somehow the investigation is made easy for you.
It doesn't always happen, Chair, but you have to take it when you can get it. Chair, in this SMS, and I'll just set out how we found it. And so when the document, and
Well,
reading,
do tell me how you found it as well.
okay, so maybe I'll just read it, Chair, it'll be easier.
Yeah.
So I located an email in the Intaka electronic record seized by the SAPS from Alicia Marcos to Rule Delanga, both of Intaka. Alicia Marcos is one of the secretaries at Intaka, and Rule Delanga is an employee in Intaka.
And
The body of the email titled KZN contains the following. Enclosed text of an SMS sent by Sipho Shabalala to Dr. Savoy. Attached is a document on an Intaka letterhead marked File Note, SMS sent by Sipho Shabalala to Dr. Savoy on 24 August 2007 at 10:20. Amigo, hearing went very well, expecting results early next week. Now that related to the appeal where the other AFROX and INSMED, etc., was about the outcome of that appeal.
Yes.
So again, Chair, just not what one would be expecting a head of provincial treasury to be sending to a potential supplier of services to the Department of Health.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Okay,
sorry-
let's take the tea adjournment now.
yes, Chair, if I can just clarify one thing,
Yeah.
with one word. In what capacity was Delanga employed by Intaka?
Chair, if my memory serves me correct, I think he was the in-house legal person at Intaka.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll take the tea adjournment and resume at 25 to 12.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn.
All rise.
only normally use 8. We can't pay for 10. So that also, in different hospitals, that was an issue.
8 as in 8,000 instead of 10,000.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah.
So Ntaka wanted to be paid for 10 or anything above that. The department said, no, it needs to be 8. The minimum, so that led to quite a long negotiation. There was then also the cost of the backup. And this was one of the main issues from the medical professionals, where they said, we're not prepared to operate in hospitals where this is the only source of supply of oxygen. Because they said if there's a breakdown or an electricity failure, there will be no oxygen. And if they're busy operating or people are in intensive care, there would be no oxygen for those patients. Ntaka's solution to that was to provide a generator which would provide power if there was a power failure. But the plants needed significant modification if they were going to store oxygen in cylinders, which their plants weren't currently, that wasn't what they were planning to provide. So that again led to disagreements in the contracts, because the doctors wanted the department to continue to buy cylinders that would be used as the backup, obviously at an additional cost. Then this doesn't become viable. And the last point that I can remember is there was issues around whether these plants needed to be registered as a medical device by the Medical Control Council, because there was ongoing debate about whether the supply of oxygen was a medical supply or not. So those items took months effectively to try and resolve. And again, it was because officials within the organization didn't agree with what had happened, and there was pushback. And I can refer to some documents and emails where effectively the MEC, Peggy Nkonyeni, now became involved in trying to finalize these negotiations.
Now, before we go there, if I can refer you to Dr. Savoy's affidavit. It's bundle D for dog, page 1394.
Exhibit RR4D.
Yes, RR4D.
For dog. What page?
1394.
It's going to be C.
Oh, is it C?
C.
I beg your pardon. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm just trying to locate it myself.
Okay. C,
Thank you.
sorry.
I beg your pardon.
So it's exhibit RR4C.
C.
What page? 1394.
Yes, Chair.
Okay. What is that?
And
Is that somebody's affidavit?
yes, it is Mr. Savoy's affidavit. We dealt with it
In what matter?
in both matters. And just to remind you, Chair, if I can refer to page 1386, paragraph 5, where Dr. Savoy says, I've been advised that the issues that have been raised and with which I should deal in this affidavit are firstly, a certain donation that was paid by Ntaka in February 2007, and secondly, 2 commission payments paid by Ntaka to Romore Investments 738 Pty Limited in August 2007. I shall now deal with these issues. Chair, we referred to this affidavit with regard to the donation apparently made to the ANC, that through Shezi attorneys, and what Dr. Savoy said.
So this is the affidavit that, Mr. Watt, you said yesterday was furnished to the police by Dr. Savoy at some stage in the course of the police investigation.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure it's clear where the affidavit came from.
Yes.
Okay, let's continue.
And from paragraph 36 of his affidavit, page 1394, he deals with what he calls commissions paid to Romel. Could you deal with that?
Starting with what was Raumo.
Yes.
So, Chair, maybe if just to explain that, if I could refer to the diagram at TSW 19.
Is it one of those we saw yesterday?
It is, Chair.
Yes.
It's the diagram that shows the whole relationship with Intaka in the middle.
Yes.
It's in RR4D for dog at page 1958.
Yes.
So, Chair, that diagram shows that Intaka is in the middle of the picture. It shows all the relationships with the different departments, and then it shows that 2 payments were made to Romo Investments of 500,000 Rand each. Romo Investments is an entity that is owned, and the director of which is Mr. Linda Makwanazi. And
Yes.
Mr. Makwanazi is the boyfriend of the MEC for Health at the time, Ms. Peggy Nkonyeni.
Yes.
So this affidavit of Dr. Savoy attempts to address those 2 payments and what those payments were for.
Yes.
In this affidavit, he says those 2 payments...
I'm sorry. Before that, does the diagram tell us who owns Raumo?
So if we go to the left on the page,
Yeah.
in the middle, we see Intaka's in the middle. There's 2 payments to Romo.
Yeah.
Then next to that, I have LH Makwanazi and the
Yes.
arrow going across with 100%.
Yes.
So he's the 100% owner of Romo Investments.
Okay.
And then I link,
What was Raumo a CC?
it was a
Trust
company
corporation.
to my recollection, Chair.
Yes. Okay. But he was the sole director.
Correct, Chair.
Okay.
Chair, the interesting point is the entity was initially registered on the 26th of March 2007.
Yes.
Mr. Makwanazi became a director on the 4th of May 2007.
Yes. Okay.
Now, the importance of those dates is that Dr. Savoy in his affidavit says the 2 payments of 500,000 Rand related to Mr. Makwanazi's assistance and involvement with obtaining the contracts for the supply of the Watakas to the Appelsbosch and Ridgevlei hospitals.
Yes.
Now, the problem with that explanation, Chair, and where, with respect to Dr. Savoy, it doesn't all tie together, is those contracts for those hospitals were awarded in October of 2006.
Yes.
The payments are now made in August and November of 2007,
Yes.
some more than 10 months later.
Yes.
So, but what was happening...
Were those payments, so the payments were made to the legal entity and not to Mr. Mkwanazi in his personal capacity?
Correct, Chair.
And assuming if Raumo had existed in 2006 and Mr. Mkwanazi had been involved in it, and Raumo had been used, assuming it would have been lawful for this to happen, to assist Intaka to get this business, then at least if Raumo existed in 2006 and Mr. Mkwanazi was part of it at the time, maybe there could be something in the proposition, but you are saying that Mr. Mkhwanazi and Raumo had no involvement with each other prior to 2007, and you say the award was in 2006.
That's correct, Chair. And just to take that one step further, there was also nothing in TACA's records that were seized, including the emails, as well as the Department of Health's records, including all the officials interviewed, saying that Mr. Mkhwanazi, in his personal capacity, had any involvement either. So he may have said, I did it in my personal capacity, my company was only registered later, but in his personal capacity, his name or any mention of him doesn't appear anywhere in that process.
But does Dr. Savoy, in his affidavit, explain exactly what it is that either Raumo or Mr. Mkhwanazi did for Intaga?
So, Jim, maybe it would be better if I just read the specific paragraphs.
Yes.
So, Chair, if we go to page 1394, which is in RR4C,
Yes.
at paragraph 36, it reads, I now turn to the issue of the commission paid to Raumo. Paragraph 37. In this regard, Mr. Lindelihle Mkhwanazi, with whom we had initially come into contact at an early stage during our discussions with various role players in KZN, approached us expressing an interest in marketing our products in KZN. He indicated that he was already supplying stationery and other products to KZN PG departments, and we therefore thought that there would be no harm in giving him an opportunity to market ours as well. I would add that discussions with previous potential BE business partners in KZN had come to naught. I cannot recall exactly when the initial discussions with Mr. Mkhwanazi took place. Paragraph 38. We initially had in place, however, what I would describe as a gentleman's agreement, in terms of which it was agreed he would promote Intaka and its products within the geographical area of KZN. The intention was that this would be followed up with a formal sole agency agreement, in terms of which, inter alia, he would be entitled to commission on all Intaka water purification and self-generating oxygen equipment sold in KZN, irrespective of whether he was the direct cause of the sale. This is the standard approach reached in our sole agency agreements. That this was not pursued at an early stage after the initial discussions and agreement is perhaps due in part to the fact that Intaka did not have a full-time legal counsel at the time, and it was only subsequent to the appointment of Mr. Roel de Lange in February 2007 that a number of outstanding legal issues or issues with legal implications were followed up. Paragraph 39. Be that as it may, however, at some point subsequent to our discussions with Mr. Mkhwanazi, I was approached by Dr. Busi Nyambezi, the then head Department of Health, whom I had met previously together with the MEC of Health for KZN, Ms. Peggy Nkonyini. Dr. Nyambezi inquired for me about the possible purchase of 2 Watakas for the Rietvlei and Appelsbosch hospitals.
Now, if you can just stop there. It is clear what he is saying, and it will appear as we refer further, he refers to this as commission, not for securing the self-generating oxygen plant contract, but as commission for securing the 2 Watakas, the water purification plants. Is that correct?
Correct, Chair.
Okay, continue.
But Chair, just on paragraph 39, there was no documents anywhere. And as I said before, from what I saw, Intaka had the employees printed out everything or typed it up and saved it in files, etc. So if there was communication with Mr. Mkhwanazi, I would have expected to have found something, even if it was SMSs, because that's the way they kept their records. So there was absolutely nothing in their records around that time. Chair, and then maybe just the...
But was there any indication that either Mr. Mkhwanazi or Raumo was doing any marketing for anybody.
Chair, I didn't have their records,
Yes,
but from what I could see in Intaka's records, they weren't doing anything.
yes, yes. Yes, well, it would be interesting to see whether their business involved marketing anybody's product at all at the time. Yes.
You could then go to paragraph 44.
Of course, Mr. White, if there is no proper explanation or satisfactory explanation for these two payments to Raumo and Mr. Mkwanas, it may well be that those payments might be part of the explanation for some of the things that are difficult to understand in regard to these projects.
Chair, I agree 100%. And that was the conclusions that the prosecutors in this matter came to originally. When you look at it as a complete picture, they said, as Chair said, a lot of things are inexplicable for what was done, and the fact that money is now being paid to people linked to people in positions that could influence these processes. The inference that was drawn by the prosecutors was that these were corrupt payments, Chair.
Yes, thank you.
So if you can deal with paragraph 44, please.
The two Watakas were subsequently supplied as per the quotation, and copies of the relevant sales orders and tax invoice of 6 December 2006 are attached, as are also a letter from myself to Dr. Nyambezi dated 12 December regarding the 50% issue, including fax transmission form, 3 further tax invoices, 311, 347, and 348, and an extract from Intaka's general ledger in this regard. Chair, the 50% that is being referred to there is Intaka wanted a 50% upfront payment before, based on receipt of the order.
Okay.
And there was a pushback from the department saying, in terms of government procurement, we can't pay up front.
Yes.
You need to deliver and then we will pay you. So,
Yes.
so there was some backwards and forwards regarding that as well.
Yes. I'm sorry, I just want to go back to the commission, to the two payments. Did your investigation reveal how far that money went?
No, Chair, no, I don't know exactly.
It went to Raumo, and did it end there?
Chair, it was used from there. There was nothing, I couldn't
indicate.
trace it to any specific other individual
Yeah,
linked to the Department of Health.
yes, okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, now, the Chair,
So-
just to make the point in
Yeah.
paragraph 44 again, it's
Yes,
made very clear by Dr. Savoy that he is referring to the two Watakas, not the self-generating oxygen plants.
yes.
If you could then please deal with what he says on paragraphs 46 and 47.
But before you do that, just to go back to the point, I think at 44, you say that Intaga demanded an upfront payment, and there was resistance to that from officials within the Department of Health.
Correct, Chair.
Yes. And later on, you will indicate how far that debate went,
Well,
how
Chair,
it
they
ended.
weren't, an upfront payment wasn't made.
Was not made. Oh,
Correct.
okay, okay.
So, Chair, paragraph 46 on page 1397, it reads, reverting to the issue of Mr. Makwenazi and the commissions paid to him as already indicated, I was of the view that a gentleman's agreement existed between us, and that as a result he was entitled to commissions on the sale of the two Watakas, as detailed above. I do note that by the time the payment for the two Watakas had been made, to Intaka by the Department of Health. The standard sole agency agreement prepared by our legal counsel, Mr. Langa, had not yet been concluded with Mr. Makwenazi. After the agreement was prepared by Mr. De Lange, the matter was also subsequently followed up by our commercial department under the direction of Mr. Fernando Prederi. However, in the spirit of the gentleman's agreement, I nevertheless believe the commission should be paid to him in respect of the 2 Wataka sales, and therefore authorized that such payments be made. Copies of the documentations pertaining to the payments are attached. So, Chair, there was, apart from the so-called gentleman's agreement, there was nothing to support the link of Mr. Makwenazi to the sale of the water purification plants for the Appelsbosch and Rietvlees Hospital.
But did your team look at Intaga's computers and cell phones for Dr. Savoy's to see what communications, either by email or letters or SMSs or WhatsApp, may have taken place between Mr. Makwenazi and Intaga about his marketing role?
Gee, we could find nothing in their records, both hard copy documents that were seized. There were some 320 lever arch files of documents seized from Intaka's premises, as well as we had approximately 3 terabytes of electronic data from the various computers, and we couldn't find details of what he was alleged to have done relating to this marketing.
Yes. And actual communication between them?
Not at the time, Chair.
Not at the time.
So, Chair, what I will refer to shortly is where I found records that Mr. Makwenazi had meetings with Dr. Savoy together with Peggy and Konyeni at the time.
You found evidence of that?
Correct, Chair.
And was this prior to the award of the
So it was
Intaka,
after the award of the water purification,
yeah,
but prior to the finalization of the contract for the oxygen plants.
yes.
So, Chair,
And how did you find evidence of that meeting? Was that in some correspondence? Was it that in some SMSs? Or?
so Chair, maybe if I could just refer to that.
So we will deal with that in due course. Perhaps if I can take it step by step, Chair.
No, I just want to know now. Yeah.
So, Chair, it was in the records of Intaka.
Yes.
So one of the sources was Dr. Savoy's electronic diary,
Yes.
which we then matched back to supporting documents like bookings for air tickets, hotel
Yes.
accommodation, etc.,
Yes.
as well as other documents in Intaka's records confirming that meetings were set down and were to take place.
Yes. So you found records which reflected that such a meeting did take place.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah, and then later on we can go to the records, but that's how you came to know.
Correct, Chair.
Would there have been any minutes of the
There's
discussions? No minutes.
So, Chair, I come to the conclusion that those were not official Department of Health meetings because there's no minutes and no feedback into the Department of Health based on those meetings. So those appeared to have been private meetings of Ms. Nkunieni and Mr. Makwenazi with
Yeah.
Dr. Savoy.
Okay, thank you.
So now going back, you said that the bid was accepted on the 26th of June 2007, and we know that the contract was ultimately signed on the 13th of December 2007, nearly 6 months later. And you explained that there was a delay in signing the contract because of these difficulties that had been raised. And Chair, I am now going to refer to documents from which I will submit it will become clear what the true purpose of the payment to Rowmore Investments was.
Yes.
So, Chair,
Where do I go?
if we can go back, I think it's bundle B, Chair, so it's RR4B for bad. And it's page 630.
Page 630.
Yes, Chair. And the bottom of that page, paragraph 9.128.
Yes.
So, Chair, this is now some 5 months after the award, and it's about a month before the contract the appointment's actually made. And, Chair, to put into context, the two payments of 500,000 Rand to Rowmore Investments were on the 30th of August and the 23rd of November 2007. So this is between the two payments. This communication took place. So Mr. De Lange, who's the in-house legal at Intaka, sent a letter to Dr. Mbele. Dr. Mbele at the time was the new head of department of KZN Health. So Dr. Nyambezi had been removed.
Did he or she succeed Dr. Nyambezi?
Correct, Chair. It's a
Okay,
she
was
as
it
well,
a
Chair.
was it a she?
Also a she.
Okay.
So on the 15th of November 2007, and the email is copied to Ms. Nkonyeni. Okay? And it relates to the delays experienced and the need to finalize the agreement. Okay, so that's what that email is about. Dr. Savoy sent an email to De Lange on the same day that was titled KZN Tender Contract, and included in that email is the following. After a long conference with the MEC, that would be Ms. Nkonyeni, she is very disappointed with HOD and Victor attitude not proceeding as per her instructions. Chair, the HOD was Dr. Mbele and Victor was Mr. Nshangasi, the head of the Supply Chain Management Department. All this situation was created because Victor received questionnaire from DA and only today disclosed to MEC. MEC will reply to DA. Victor must send to you legal documents as you requested today. If you don't receive them, claim them to him by email and a copy to MEC. I informed the MEC that as per my instructions, once you receive these documents, you will email him, CC MEC and HOD, informing that you and the commercial director will be there to make a short presentation of the company and product to HOD. She will make sure that you return with the document signed. I explained to her the reason why I will not be there, and she fully agreed.
This is Dr. Mbele. Oh, no, this is De Lange. Who is writing here?
So this is Dr. Savoy sending this to De Lange. So there was an initial email.
And De Lange is legal counsel, internal legal counsel for Intaka.
Correct. So
So Dr. Savoy had a conversation with Dr. Mbele.
No, with Ms. Nkonyeni, Chair.
With Ms. Nkonyeni.
Yes, Chair.
And he is now updating De Lange, Mr. De Lange, about what transpired in that conversation. Is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay.
Because Mr. De Lange had been tasked, or was the person that was interacting with the legal people at the Department of Health, trying to get the contract finalized. So because it wasn't getting finalized, Dr. Savoy appears to have gone outside of the legal process, negotiations, to the MEC,
Yes.
for her to put pressure on the people to get it finalized.
Yes.
The slight additional complication is now that there was also a new head of department.
Yes.
So that's why my interpretation is they now wanted to do a brief presentation to her as to what this is actually about as well.
Let me just see. Yes, okay. Yes, you can continue.
So
So does this email reflect that Mr. De Lange would do the presentation and Dr. Savoy would not be there?
Correct, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
And it also, Chair, indicates that he is reporting to De Lange that after a long conference with Ms. Ngunyeni, she is very disappointed with the head of department and Victor's attitude for not proceeding. And this whole situation is created because of a questionnaire from the DA. But the assurance is at the end, very importantly, she will make sure that you return with the documents signed. If I can then turn to page 632 and paragraph 9.1.33, which refers to a further email, internal email, dated the 5th of December 2007, from Savoy to De Lange. Could you deal with that?
Chair, this email was titled KZN Contract Oxygen Generators. And in that email, Dr. Savoy advises Mr. De Lange as follows. According to yesterday's telephone conversation with the MEC of Health, KZN, I reiterate the need for both parties to have the contract signed this week.
And paragraph 9.13.4, what does that deal with?
So, Chair, this paragraph now sets out that never mind the people at the Department of Health having concerns about the contract. Some of the employees at Intaka also felt that the contract wasn't properly worded or drafted because they didn't believe their product met the requirements of the contract. And Chair, this is a document now dated the 7th of December 2007. And it's sent, and I'm reading from the second line, from Stefan Oosthuizen, who was the Industrial and Technical Director of Intaka. He sent this email to Mr. De Lange. He copied Mr. Praderi, who was one of the directors, and Mr. Erasmus. I don't quite recall what Mr. Erasmus's position was. But he raised concerns with regard to the bid and the bid offer. These concerns are relevant particularly to point 1, and then I quote from his email. Scope is clear that supply must be continuous online supply. Our standard machines, as a standalone, cannot provide this without the cylinder manifold or VIE of the hospital as backup. Chair, I conclude that hence at that stage, the technical people at Intaka said the contract we are about to sign, our equipment doesn't meet the specifications. So, and that was why this thing had been dragging on for so long. But Chair, regardless of the internal issues, the contract was still signed 6 days later on the 13th of December 2007.
So, just going back to that to make the point, what's being said to De Lange, who then signs the agreement within a few days of being told this, presumably by technical people in his own company, that we are providing self-generating oxygen plants that are about to be relied on by hospitals and patients who in operations or otherwise in intensive care. And we are not sure that our machine will give continuous supply, and that we will need backup. What backup were they contemplating?
Chair, there was two options. Either the department had to buy or rent cylinders, as it had used in the past, or the machine, the plant to be provided by Intaka had to be modified to add on an additional unit to it where the oxygen could be stored in tanks.
1 second, sorry.
Then, on the same day, I believe that the contract was signed, the 13th of December 2007. You refer to an email of that date sent to staff members in Taka by Savoy. It's page 632, para 9.135. Could you deal with that?
I could just read it, Chair, and then I will comment. On 13 December 2007 at 18:03, in brackets I'll then say the agreement was signed earlier in the day at Nkosi Albert Luthuli Hospital. Savoy sent an email to 4 of his staff. The content of the email relates to Intaka's relationship with Romore Investments, as at 13 December 2007, being more than a year after they had been awarded the supply of the 2 water purification plants for Rietvlei and Apples Bosch hospitals, and things that either did not or were not going to happen: quantities, maintenance, contract, and the removal of 1 hospital. So, Chair, they're effectively muddling both together. They're referring to the Oxentaka contract, because that's where the issues of quantities, maintenance contract, etc., as well as the Rietvlei and Apples Bosch hospital. But the coincidence is this email is written in the afternoon or early evening, 6 o'clock in the evening, when the contract was signed that afternoon for the Oxentakas. So while it refers to the Watakas, this email is written by Dr. Savoy on exactly the same day that the Oxentaka contract is signed.
Yes.
Jim, maybe?
I'm trying to understand the point you are making about the time of the signing and the time of the email.
So, Chair, this email was written within hours of the Oxentaka contract being signed.
Yes.
So my inference to draw from that is that the issue that...
Let's start with what it says, because then maybe that's where I will get the clue.
Okay, so the
about
content...
quantities and maintenance, what was it saying, the email, about all those things?
So, Chair, maybe I can refer to the... I have a quote on the next page.
Yes, let's read that first.
Page 633.
Yeah.
Considering that the conditions of the KZN tender contract that was signed are different from what was initially approved between our company and the Department of Health, I believe it is necessary and important to check the draft contract sent to Romore Investments. It must be transmitted to Romore that there are a lot of things agreed with the Department of Health of KZN that were going to happen and did not happen as: 1, they decided to consider the wrong quantities mentioned in the tender and not the volumes that our technicians got during the visit, and that most of them were confirmed later by Mr. Victor of the Chain Supply Management. There is no evidence that any quantities were considered at the signing of the agreement, as the schedule to Annexure B was not completed. That's my insert, Chair. 2, they did not accept the maintenance contract. 3, they took 1 hospital out, alleging that it is part of the Eastern Cape and not KZN, not substituting for another one, etc.
Yes.
So, Chair,
So what was the point about the time when the agreement was signed and the timing of the email or its contents?
So, Chair, this email is now the first time I can find the references to Romore Investments, and
Yes.
whether they, and it's now linking them to this contract, because
And is it not interesting that Romore is Romore Investments, and if you think about marketing, seems to me very diverse things. If you are an investment company, then you do marketing for other people.
Chair, I think Romore Investments was just the name of the shelf company that was purchased. So I didn't draw any inference from the name.
Yes, but if you want to if you want a vehicle for a marketing business, I don't think you call it investment.
I would agree, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Chair. So now,
So, but still, I think I'm still trying to get the point. Maybe I'm overemphasizing, but I just want to make sure that I don't miss an important point that you may have been trying to make, that about the fact that the contract was signed earlier on that particular day, and there was this email.
So, Chair, the point I was trying to make is that suddenly this relationship seems to come to light and is now being referred to internally in TACA. And so my inference is that the signing of the contract to the Oxentakers was in one way or another linked to Romore Investments. Because why does he now refer to it, and the issues that Intaka wasn't happy about around the quantities, the maintenance contracts, etc. He now refers to that and says we now need to check what we were discussing with Romore relating to this contract. Whereas Dr. Savoy has said the monies that were paid to Romore relate to the water purification plants. Whereas now appears that,
Yes. Okay. No,
so, and based on the timing of those payments leading up to the signing of this contract, it's my opinion, Chair, that those payments linked to this contract, not to something that happened more than a year prior to this.
So the point you are making is simply this. The fact that this email, which is sent a few hours after the signing of the contract that relates to Oxentaka, the fact that Romore Investments is mentioned in relation to that contract and not in relation to Wataka, to the Wataka contract,
Correct.
is inconsistent with Dr. Savoy's version that those two payments relate to Romore's role in marketing is inconsistent with Dr. Savoy's version that it was payment connected with Wataka.
Correct.
Yeah, why mention it in relation to Oxentaka if Romore relates to Wataka? Unless, of course, because I think his affidavit, that is Dr. Savoy's affidavit, seemed to suggest that Romore or Mr. Mkwanazi was going to market their products, plural, their products, unless somewhere he says he also marketed this Oxentaka, and those payments included his work that he did in relation to this, but he doesn't say that.
Chair, he doesn't say that.
Yeah.
But also, Mr. Makwanazi is not involved, from what I can see. Dr. Savoy dealt directly with the head of department at the time, setting the specifications. So any involvement, so Chair, the only involvement I can see of Mr. Makwanazi is that he is the boyfriend of the MEC of Health at the time who assisted in getting the contract signed. And the payments are made over that time period where her involvement was very clear that Dr. Savoy was using her influence to get the contract signed.
Okay, thank you.
and Chair, for clarity, what the staff are told is that I'm complaining about the terms of the contract that I eventually got. And he says, I believe it's necessary and important to check the drafts contract sent to Romore Investments. It must be transmitted to Romore, and there are a lot of things agreed with the Department of Health and KwaZulu-Natal that were going to happen and did not happen. And he says, I've got the wrong quantities, they haven't got a maintenance contract, and he complains. But now I'm going to refer to something that occurs the day after the contract is signed. And I'd like to refer you, Chair, to page 673, paragraph 20. You say there that Ms. Nkunyeni was present at the hospital on the 13th of December 2007 when the agreement was signed. You then refer to an SMS sent the following day.
I'm sorry, who writes here? Is this an email or what is this, and who does it, is it going to?
We're going to refer to an SMS.
Sorry?
So paragraph 20 is Mr. White recording on page 673.
Oh, okay, yes.
He records Peggy Nkunyeni was present at the IALC hospital on the 13th.
Well, hang on. This is Mr. White in his report recording that Ms. Peggy Nkunyeni was present.
Yes.
Yes.
On the 13th.
This is just part of the report, and
Exactly.
in that paragraph he quotes an SMS or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just important that as we go to whatever page, it's clear what document it is, from whom to whom, and
Yes.
about what.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you record that she was present at the hospital on the 13th of December 2007 when the agreement was signed. Can you tell the court what you discovered from your investigations, referred to in paragraph 20 of your report, happened the very next day, the 14th of December 2007?
So, Chair, maybe just to come back to the fact that Ms. Nkunyeni was present. So people that were part of the process where the agreement was signed said Ms. Nkunyeni was present in the room, but she sat at the other end of the table. She wasn't part of the discussions. And that was at the Nkosi Albert Luthuli Hospital in Durban. On the following day after...
That's an interesting venue to go and sign a contract at.
So, Chair,
One would have thought that they would go to the department's offices.
Chair, it may sound strange, but in the course of these investigations, we had a number of meetings at that hospital complex because they have an administration wing where they have a number of boardrooms.
Oh.
So it seems to be used for meetings by the Department of Health on a fairly regular basis. So it wasn't, it does happen. It's not because I attended similar.
Okay, now I'm just thinking that I'm under the impression that the headquarters of the department would be in Pietermaritzburg, because that's the capital of the province.
That is correct.
And Nkosi Albert Luthuli Hospital is in Durban.
Correct.
Okay, but you say that there are certain facilities which might be attractive for use by the department.
Correct. There's an administration block with a number of boardrooms that are used for meetings.
Okay. Yes.
So, Chair, the day following the signing of that contract for the oxen talkers, there was an SMS sent to Dr. Savoy. A copy of that was found in Intaka's records, and it reads as follows.
As sent by?
Ms. Nkunyeni.
Yes, okay.
It says, Doc, the contract was signed yesterday, although your guys were not happy with maintenance and few other things. But they were crutched because of what was reflected in the bid document. Next time we'll have to be more careful, and perhaps you need to cancel the donation since you are losing on maintenance. What do you suggest, Peggy? Chair, that's just a very, very unusual SMS to be sent. It almost looks, from reading that SMS, that Ms. Nkunyeni is more concerned about the welfare of Intaka and Dr. Savoy than she is about the department she's the MEC of.
Yes. And the reference to donation?
So, Chair, I don't know. Everybody's asked me that question. I don't know what donation she's referring to.
Yes.
So it may be a donation I don't know about.
Did you ask Dr. Savoy what
Chair,
donation
they were all accused in the matter, Chair.
at that stage? So you never got a chance to ask him?
I did not,
Okay.
Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Well, they were suspects at the stage, Chair, when we did the
Yes.
investigation.
Okay.
And Mr. White, the way that I read it is that we know from the internal memorandum that we were referring to earlier that Mr. Savoy wasn't happy that he had to maintain these oxygen purification plants in terms of the final agreement. And it's quite clear that there would be a cost implication to him if he were to, this is what I'm deducing, there would be a cost implication to him if he had to bear the cost of maintenance. And I assume then when she says by, she means but, and a few other things. But they were crushed because of what was reflected in the bid document. And you can tell me if you agree, can only read that to mean that from what was said in the bid document, it appeared that they would have to assume responsibility for maintenance. But then what's more important is she says, next time we'll have to be more careful. And then, what can one only deduce from this? You've now got to incur greater costs because you're incurring maintenance. So she says, perhaps you need to cancel the donation since you're losing on maintenance. What do you suggest? She's saying, I can understand maybe you don't want to make such a big a donation. I can't read it any other way.
So, Chair, maybe that's why in our investigation we didn't find this donation, if there was going to be one. Or
Sorry, just repeat that.
So, Chair, maybe if that's the interpretation of this SMS, maybe that's why we didn't identify a further payment to anybody, because the decision was made, I'm not going to make, and loosely call it a donation, because the contract wasn't as favorable as I originally anticipated.
Ms. Wenzel, just repeat the interpretation that you attached to it. Let me understand it.
Yes, Chair, just bear with me. I'm just going to go back to it. Now, she says, Doc, exclamation mark. The contract was signed yesterday, although your guys were not happy with maintenance and a few other things. By, I read as but. They were, I think it should be crushed, perhaps with a C, an S, because it's C-R-U-C-H-E-D, because of what was reflected in the bid document. I understand that to mean that they weren't happy with having to assume responsibility for maintenance. We know from the earlier documents this was one of the contentious issues. Who was going to bear responsibility for maintenance? And they are not happy that at the end of the day, it is found that Savoy, who is the owner of the machine, needs to be responsible for its own maintenance. What he wanted to do is lease the oxygen, but then also make the department pay for the maintenance of the machine. So he didn't have that. And when she says they were crushed because of what was reflected in the bid document, I read that to mean that the bid document specified that they would have to be responsible for maintenance. So that was a problem. The next thing is, she says...
Has somebody looked at the bid document and see whether it would support that?
Correct, Chair. The document did say, the bid specifications said that the supplier would be responsible for the maintenance.
Oh, okay.
But Intaka, after being awarded, didn't want that. They didn't want that in the
Yes,
final
okay.
contract.
Okay. So what you are saying this, that when Ms. Konyeni says in the email, your guys were not happy with maintenance and a few other things, let's stick with maintenance. you understand that to mean that they didn't want Intaga to be responsible for maintenance, and their stance was contrary to the bid specification, because the bid specification required Intaga to be responsible for that. So they didn't get that, and the reason they didn't get that is because of the bid document.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, and you say you can go along with that interpretation.
I can confirm that's the facts, Chair,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
And then following on that, Chair, my submission is that what is said now is, I know you wanted the department to pay for maintenance. Now I understand, and we have to be more careful next time. You are going to have to pay for the maintenance. So there's going to be an extra cost. You're not going to get as much out of this deal as you anticipated. And so what does she offer him? She says, perhaps you need to cancel the donation since you are losing on maintenance. What do you suggest, Peggy?
Yes. What did you say to that interpretation? I know about the first part. I don't know if you...
So Chair, we didn't find any subsequent payment that was made.
Yes.
So my only conclusion could be that if there had been an agreement to make a payment, that maybe it was cancelled.
Yes.
Because the contract wasn't as lucrative as Intaga
Yes.
originally anticipated.
Yes, okay, thank you. Now, what did you understand the reference to we to be referring to? We will have to be more careful.
So Chair, my interpretation of that was that
Who was the we?
it was referring to herself and Intaga, as in we together will have to be more careful next time. So she almost was putting herself as part of Intaga rather
Yeah.
than as the political head of the department.
Yes, because the one option is that she was talking about the head department. The other option is that she was talking about herself on the one hand, or herself and the department on the one hand, and Intaga or Dr. Savoy and Intaga on the other. But you say if one looks at the context, you don't think it's a reference to her and the department.
Chair, it doesn't actually matter which variation of that it is.
Yes.
It's wrong.
Yes.
If it's her in the
Because
department,
they
her
should not be
personally,
working together. They should not be a unit. Yeah.
because why would the department have to be more careful that they got a
Yes.
better deal
Yes.
than the supplier wanted?
Yes.
So she should be happy for the department.
Yes,
Not
yes.
need to be more careful next time out so I can
Yes.
give a better deal to the supplier.
So you are saying, irrespective of whether it was referring, she was referring to herself and Dr. Savoy, or herself and Dr. Savoy and Intaga, or she included the department, or she was meaning herself and the department. It was simply wrong. They couldn't be talked or spoken about as a unit, the department and Intaga.
Correct.
Or herself and Intaga or Dr. Savoy.
Because, Chair, when it comes to maintenance, her only interest should have been the department and what is it going to cost the department.
Yes. She
Not-
should not have been moaning about the fact that Intaga, Dr. Savoy's guys didn't get what they wanted about maintenance.
Correct, Chair.
And she seems to have been to be moaning about that.
I agree, Chair.
The end result of the agreement is in favor of her department, but she seems to lament that,
Agreed, Chair.
as if she would have been happier if the end result was that Intaga got its way, which would have been the department must be responsible for maintenance.
Agreed, Chair.
And that's not what she should have stood for.
I agree.
Okay.
And Chair, my submission to you is that the inference is it's inescapable, that the we referred to is Peggy Nkonyeni and the person she calls Doc.
Yes.
And the reason for that is that after saying, I couldn't get the department to pay for maintenance because of what was in the bid documents, she ties the statement, next time we'll have to be more careful, with it follows, and in the very same sentence, she says, and perhaps you need to cancel the donation since you're losing maintenance.
So she regrets that the department insisted that Intaga must be responsible for maintenance. And she wants to compensate for that. And she says next time we'll need to be more careful, which
Yes.
seems to suggest next time there is anything like this, we must be careful about the bid
Yes.
specification.
Yes, Chair. It can only mean
Because
that.
this time, the reason why we are ending with this is because the bid specification was clear.
Yes, Chair.
One gets the impression that
Exactly. Chair, with respect, it can have no other meaning.
now,
Chair, if
Yes.
I can make one point, and that is that perhaps she's not quite as magnanimous as it would appear, because we know that her boyfriend's company, Romor, was paid R1 million in chances of 500,000 each. And I'd like to ask Mr. White, at this stage, had those payments been made?
They had been made, Chair.
how long before are you able
So
to remember?
they were made on the 30th of August and the 23rd of November.
Yes.
So one payment was some 3 weeks prior to this, and the other one was 3 months prior to this.
And it would be difficult if Mr. Mkwanazi was still her romantic partner. It would be difficult to think that she was not aware of those payments 3 months later.
I agree, Chair, and she was having ongoing meetings during that period with Dr. Savoy and Mr. Makwanazi.
Between the payment dates and this
Around
This date.
before, during, and after that period. Chair.
yes.
Chair, maybe I could just refer to a summary of those meetings, just the dates.
Yes, okay.
Chair, if I could just refer to that in RR4C at page 1268.
Yes, exhibit RR4C, page 1268, yes.
So, Chair, that's a summary based on the records from Intaka that I could find, where meetings were scheduled in Dr. Savoy's diary with Ms. Nkonyeni or Mr. Makwanazi. So, Chair,
Yes.
that summary in that table, I've interpreted where it refers to Peggy to be a reference to Ms. Peggy Nkonyeni,
Yes,
and where it refers to Linda to a reference to Mr. Ndelihle Makwanazi, where it in many instances is just referred to as Linda, but if you look in line 7 on the 10th of July 2007,
Yeah, just to read them out, all those relevant ones. Let's get them into the transcript.
okay. So, Chair, on the 18th of January 2007, there was a meeting with Dr. Busi Nyambezi and the MEC for Health for KwaZulu-Natal at our Intaka premises. So that MEC at the time was Ms. Peggy Nkonyeni. On the 12th of April 2007,
So again, just to make sure that whoever reads the transcript knows, this is now this relates to meetings between Dr. Savoy and the people indicated on this page. Okay, continue.
correct, Chair, and that's
sorry,
from,
Chair, and it comes from Dr. Savoy's electronic diary.
correct, Chair.
Yes, okay.
So the 12th of April 2007, MEC Peggy in CT, which I've interpreted to be Cape Town.
Yes,
The 13th of April, MEC Peggy in Cape Town. The 4th of May, Peggy and Linda in Cape Town.
yes,
The 7th of June 2007, Linda plus MEC Peggy. The 21st of June 2007, collect Linda and Peggy. And then there's a further reference to meeting with Dr. Shabir, Linda and Peggy. Dr. Shabir was from the Northern Cape Department of Health. On the 10th of July, so Chair, just to put it into context, the contract for the oxen talkers, the bid adjudication committee and the final clearance from the appeals, that was accepted on the 26th of June 2007. So up until line 6, the 21st of June, that is before the oxen talker award is made. So subsequent to that is the period when the Department of Health is trying to negotiate the terms with Intaka that led to the signing of the contract on the 13th of December. So during that negotiation period, there's now a meeting on the 10th of July 2007, Linda and MEC Peggy in Cape Town.
I'm sorry, I just want to take you back to item 6, 21 June 2007. Says 9 o'clock, collect Linda and Peggy. Do you know whether that means collect them from the airport or what?
That's my understanding, Chair.
Yes. Okay, continue. That is on 21 June 2007. Okay, continue.
So 10 July 2007 is Linda Makunazi and MEC Peggy. On the 11th of July 2007, Linda, MEC Peggy. Chair, some 3 weeks later, on the 3rd of August, the first 500,000 Rand payment is made to Romore Investments.
That's 600,000.
So, Chair, it's just a bad photocopy, but the original one, it's 500,000, Chair.
It's 500.
It's 500,000.
Oh, okay. This was written in the diary.
No, Chair, this is not in the diary. I just put it in
Oh, for
amongst this
convenience.
so that you can see
Yeah, okay.
the dates the payments were made.
Okay, okay.
On the 16th of August 2007, Peggy Y in Cape Town. 17th of the August, Peggy Y in Cape Town.
And to be fair, it says, I would read it as Peggy Y in Cape Town to be confirmed. That's CONF.
Correct, Chair. That would probably
That
be
may
the
be,
correct
yeah.
interpretation.
Yes.
Then on the 13th of August 2007, MEC Peggy Linda in Cape Town.
Did you say September 13, 3 September?
3
I think?
September 2007.
Yeah. Okay.
Then 10 October 2007, Linda Y, MEC Peggy at Steenberg. Chair, Steenberg is a hotel in Cape Town. We confirmed they stayed at that hotel.
Okay.
8th of November 2007, MEC Peggy in Cape Town. Some 2 weeks later.
I'm sorry, did you do 14/5 to, is it from 5 to 6 November 2007, accommodation at Steenberg Hotel?
That was correct.
You
Sorry,
covered
I
that.
didn't read that line out. That
Yes.
was accommodation for Mr. L. Makunazi and Ms. O. Nkunyeni. Then on the 8th of November,
This one says O. I take it maybe it's a mistake or what?
Chair, that's how it was in the diary, but
That is what was in the diary.
correct, Chair.
Yeah, but the only Nkonyeni that has been referred to is the MEC.
Correct, Chair.
Okay.
Then there's a further, I'll just insert it so we can see the relevance of the dates of the payment. On the 23rd of November was the second payment of 500,000 Rand to Romore Investments. And then, Chair, there's no other meetings in Cape Town until the following year on the 18th of February. And that was actually a meeting in Durban. And then there's another meeting much later in 2008. So, Chair, what I was trying to show by that summary is to show that there was almost monthly meetings
between Dr. Savoy and the MEC Nkonyeni and Mr. Linda Mkwanazi.
Correct, Chair.
Both before the award of the contract and after.
And after,
And during negotiations.
to the signing of the contract.
So with this, if this is true, then it would be difficult to think that Ms. Nkonyeni was not aware of the payment to Romore at the time of sending the email that we were dealing with earlier on, where she was lamenting the fact that the Intaga guys, Dr. Savoy's guys, didn't get what they wanted in regard to maintenance.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. And in the course of your investigations, Mr. White, did you find in the records of the Department of Health minutes?
We are now going back to,
No, I'm dealing with this still.
no,
Chair.
I mean the exhibit. Do you
I'm still
stick to
dealing
the
with
same?
page 1268. Yes, Chair.
Oh, okay. I'd closed it. Was it
Yes.
1268?
You probably don't need
I don't
the,
need to have
you
a
don't
look
need to
at
go
it.
back to it.
Okay.
Did you, in the course of your investigations, find minutes in the records of the Department of Health that referred to any of these meetings?
Chair, not the ones that Mr. Makwanazi, according to the diary, was also present at, no.
Did you ever have access to the MEC's diary to see whether those meetings were also reflected?
Chair, I can't 100% recall at this point.
Yes, okay. Okay.
Can you recall whether or who paid for the accommodation at the Steenberg Hotel for the 5th and 6th of November 2007 for Ms. Nkonyeni and her boyfriend, Mr. Linda Makunazi?
Chair, to my recollection, that was paid for by Ntaka.
I'm sorry, what is
To
that?
my recollection, was paid for by Ntaka.
Was that the traveling?
The accommodation,
The
Chair.
accommodation, the 2 days at the Steenberg Hotel in Cape Town.
Oh, okay. Or was it paid for by Intaga?
To my recollection, yes, Chair.
Yes, okay.
And then, sorry, Chair, I am referring back to something that follows page 1269.
Yes, we are done. We're not done with that email. You'll still go back to it, isn't it?
Yes, I'm going to go back to the email, but I just
Yeah.
want to point out that after, in your report, after referring to these meetings, we go back to where I started your testimony, and that was, well, not your testimony, but your testimony on this issue, and that was with the affidavit by Dr. Savoy as to his explanation for these payments. And just to recap, he said that it was for him marketing not this contract, but the purchase of the water purification plants. You make the point on page 1269 that the marketing and sale took place on and prior to 6 October 2006. Romore Investments was only registered on the 26th of March 2007, and Makwenazi was appointed as a director on the 4th of May 2007, the same day when he had a meeting with Mazars, who are also the auditors of the Intaka Group of companies. Can you just comment and explain, and is that correct?
Chair, that is correct. The company that was formed, from what I could see, was formed by Mazars, and they registered Mr. Makwenazi as the director of the entity, and they were the same entity that were the auditors of Intaka at the time. So it appears that the setting up of this company had been done at the request of Intaka, and they'd used their same auditors to form the company for Mr. Makwenazi.
And then just finally, you say it's your conclusion that you reach on page...
I'm sorry, Ms. Wenzel.
Sorry.
So this wasn't... What happened here doesn't seem to be what happened with Mr. Pandey's entities, or some of them, where they're taken out of the shelf. Or the same might have happened here, we don't know.
Chair, I think the same happened because the company was registered on the 26th of March, but Mr. Makwenazi was only made a director on the 4th of May.
Yes, but the same year, 2007.
The same year, Chair, but some more than a month later. If it was registered and he was the first director, I would have expected it to be the same date.
Yeah, okay.
And then finally you say that he was appointed a director on the 4th of May, which is the same day when he had a meeting with Mazars, who are also the auditors of the Intaka Group of companies. But then you say this: it appears from the electronic diary of Savoy and from the information provided by Rennie's Travel that Makwenazi, together with Nkonyeni, also attended a meeting with Dr. Savoy in Cape Town on the 4th of May 2007. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. So, Chair, that was referred to at line 4 in that table above that I'd previously, one of the items I'd read the date out of.
Thank you. And now, if we can go back to bundle B, which,
Is that the email? Are you going back to the email?
I'm not going back to the email. I'm going back to another document to tell there's more in the story.
Well, I want us to finalize the email.
Sure.
Let's not
Sure.
leave it for... Let's go back to the email at page 673 of RR4B.
Are you 673?
Yeah,
The SMS.
the SMS, or I thought it was
Yes.
the email, yeah, SMS.
Yes.
Is that what you wanted to go to?
I was going to go to a further
Later.
document later, but
Yeah, no, let's
go back to the
let's
email.
finish this, yeah. Mr. White, that SMS at page 673 from the MEC to Dr. Savoy, is your understanding that when she says, that is the MEC, perhaps you need to cancel the donation since you are losing on maintenance? Well, I think it's clear. It looks like she wants to, she's thinking of how maybe this could be made up how Intaga could be compensated for losing on maintenance.
I agree, Chair.
But you say you don't know what this reference to the donation was about, or what that was about, and you never found anything that threw light on what it was about.
Correct, Chair.
We know that yesterday you said that Dr. Savoy said that the 1 million rand and something that was paid to Kuboni and Shezi attorneys was a donation. If you look at, I don't know, have you thought about the dates when that payment was made, when this was made, this SMS was made? Is there any possibility that it could be referring to that donation?
So, Chair, that other donation was made on the 12th of March 2007. So it's some 9 months prior to this.
So it had already been made,
9
so it
months
could not
earlier.
be cancelled.
So I don't believe it's referring to the same payment, Chair.
Yeah. Because the cancellation of a donation must be referring, if it is a reference to a donation that had been discussed and it was contemplated, was still to be made.
That was my interpretation, Chair.
Yeah, to say, I said I would give it a donation, but maybe you should change your mind about that. That's what this.
That was my interpretation. Chair.
So, as you understand this as SMS, it could not. The reference to the donation could not be a reference to that 1 million rand donation that we talked about yesterday. You talked about yesterday. It could also not refer to the 2 payments that were made to Ron Moore, because those were not donations according to Dr. Savoy. That was payment for services rendered by Romo as far as marketing services, as far as he was concerned.
That's correct, Chair.
So it remains a mystery what the reference to donation is a reference to, other than that there may have been some prior discussion about a donation, and that's what she might be referring to.
I agree, Chair.
Okay.
And Chair, one must bear in mind, with respect, the affidavit of Dr. Savoy, where he readily admits that he paid in the contract with the Department of Traditional Affairs and Local Government a donation of 1 million rand to the ANC as a quid pro quo for getting that contract. And when one remembers that, because he says, I was told what I have to do is give the donation. And after the contract was concluded, he writes to Mr. Shabalala and says, now I need to pay the donation. And he says he then pays the donation and he's told to pay it into Kuboyeli and Shezi's attorney's trust account, which then happens. Now that's on the version of Dr. Savoy. When you read that, here, although there isn't evidence, in my view, it is implicit that a similar donation had been requested in this instance, but Ms. Mkunyeni is saying, look, I know you haven't done as well as you thought you would. You don't have to pay the donation.
Well, there may be parts of what's in the exhibit that were not referred to yesterday. I don't remember hearing or reading something to the effect that Dr. Savoy said the donation was a quid pro quo for him getting the contract. I don't remember that, but you have read more in the bundle than I have read. Maybe you are telling me what you read, but which wasn't covered yesterday.
Yes, Chair, it was covered yesterday, but perhaps after...
We can go back
We
to
can go
it
back
at
to
some
it.
stage. I do seem to have seen something in Dr. Savoy's affidavit to the effect that something like I was made to understand this is how business is done,
Yes.
or something like that.
Exactly.
But I don't know whether, I can't remember whether it was in relation to that or it was something else.
Yes, it was in relation to that.
Yes, okay, all right. Well, the other part you mentioned, namely whether this may have been a similar donation,
That's
that's just speculation at this stage.
yes, it's speculation.
Yeah, okay.
Now,
We've gone past 1 o'clock.
yes, perhaps it's a convenient
How far are we
time.
from finishing with Mr. White?
I think about 45 minutes.
Yes. Okay, we'll take the lunch adjournment now. It's 1:05. We will resume at 2:05.
Thank you,
We
Chair.
adjourn.
All rise.